Hi, Mark here from the Tangent-Bound Podcast Network and host of the flagship show, the Tangent-Bound Podcast. Did you know that we over at Tangent-Bound are always looking for amazing podcasts to promote? And did you also know that we are also proud nerds and geeks of everything from movies, music, gaming, TV shows, and comic books to wrestling, MMA, soccer, and football? Whatever you can nerd or geek out about, we've got it. And if you're interested, we can help you find it. And if you're a show looking for a place to call home, we've got you covered. Side effects may include upset stomach, dizziness, tumors, shakes, and in some rare cases, death from excessive laughter. Though to be fair, it's only sometimes. Other side effects may include diarrhea, gallstones, heart palpitations, and strong desire for cookies on the dark side. Talk to your doctor and visit TangentBoundNetwork.com and see if Tangent-Bound Network is right for you.
Sucks to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. A light sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time. Stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new Crazy Life. I'm Brian, joining me as usual, Henno.
Hello.
And not joining us as usual, Jen. No, I kid. No, Jen had something come up, so, hopefully she'll
flip the coin.
Yeah, literally, that's what it was. I was like, well, I'm recording either way, so it's either going to be with Henno or Jen. Again, the nice thing about having 3 hosts for a show,
yeah,
is we can work around stuff so much easier. Although, it would have been funny if, I had been indisposed over the next couple days, because, one of you could do one day, one could, we'd figure it out, though. So, yeah, that was a good, another moment of our, pulling the curtain back, another moment of our, like you said, flipping a coin, because we basically, for the last couple hours, were pretty much like, when can you record? I don't know. How about, is today okay? Yeah, I think so. Oh, wait, no, maybe it's not. Can you do tomorrow? I can. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe we should just do it today. Just so all
great.
over. Yeah. I mean, it works out, because, we're all pretty flexible on stuff, but it's just funny to, funny how we keep talking about it and it doesn't seem to get better.
No.
I think at some point we literally will have to just bring it down to a coin, and be like, all right, I'm flipping a coin. This is, so how you been, Henno?
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. Been, kind of lazy.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to fit into our topic for tonight.
Could be. Now, is it just an overall laziness, or is it weather related? Because it's been hot and humid here for the last week and a half or so. You don't want to go outside for any amount of time. So
it's been hot here, but it's nice. It's been nice. I can't say I've been like, ooh, let's go running.
Right. Yeah.
It's been definitely okay, get the dogs out early in the morning, sure, and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's all life is good. I have to say, it's been, but it's been. I've been, like I said, I think it'll fit into the topic. It's been by choice, not so much by feeling like I I don't have energy, or, I'm I'll even be on, on Saturday. Oh, I think I'm going to run up to the gym and go work out for a bit.
Oh, okay.
so if I want to do something, I find I can go do it. And it's been just more like choosing to have downtime, choosing to relax, and then at the same time, like I've had a few run into some of my friends that I haven't seen for a few weeks or whatever, and it's been like, what have you been doing? It's like really kind of been doing routine things a lot, like staying on top of stuff so it doesn't bite me in the butt, basically. And
that sounds like a good idea.
It's working, Mm-hmm. Go figure.
Yeah.
Go figure when that stuff works. Oh, there was one thing. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up last week, and I didn't. And this was something that I had for my update for the week was to tell everybody once again about the Shrink to Shrink podcast.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because we talked about the end of the episode 2 weeks ago, and not everybody listens to those last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, Shrink to Shrink is with a number 2. It's one of our podcast friends who the Quad Father, who does the Quad Father podcast, right? That's what it's called, right?
Quadcast, I think, isn't it?
Quadcast, that's it. It's Quadcast, yeah. Quad Father on the Quadcast. Courtney, they do a podcast where they will watch a movie. He and his professional partner. So these are a couple of actual, they're head docs in their relative fields, and they'll review a movie and they'll look at it from their they'll throw their professional thoughts on it. And they reviewed the 13 Reasons Netflix show that had to do with suicide, and I'm just throwing it out there again. If you have kids, if you have someone in your life that is has threatened suicide or is in one of those places, listen to this podcast. They have great tips in it. They talk a lot about what it's like to be a teenager, the things that teenagers face. I mean, I have a list of stuff that that I've kept, that I just basically made a list off of listening to the podcast because I thought it was really significant stuff. And I think it's a really important podcast for people to listen to. Mm-hmm. I threw it out there on Facebook, and I had some responses from somebody that I went to high school with, whose daughter suffers from anxiety and depression, and was like, "Wow, this was huge." It really made a difference. So
yeah, good.
So I wanted to throw that out there, because I really think, like I said, anyone if you got kids that are approaching teenage years or are there, you'll get something out of it. I think it's that place where we've talked about many times where we're just like, well, we don't have kids, so I don't know what to say here.
Yeah, right.
And they really summed it up real well. Oh, and the other thing so I've been reading Henry Rollins' book, Get on the Bus.
Okay.
It was the first book he published, and it's basically his journal entries from the when he joined Black Flag.
Okay.
And it starts as kind of just a synopsis of them touring, but eventually it folds into his actual journals, and it starts becoming journal entries. And I'm at this point where it's the mid-'80s, and he's doing what he calls his talking shows, which is spoken word, and he is learning to be a writer. He's reading, but it's flat out. I mean, it's just a big freaking bummer reading this thing. I mean,
wow.
I want to get through just to say that I read it.
Yeah.
But it's been brutal. I mean, and here's the part that gets me is he's not in a good place in his existence at this time in his life. Touring is great, but he is into self-inflicted pain. He suffers from some sort of depression. He's definitely got anxiety. And it manifests itself mostly in different forms of anger. And when he gets to the, I don't know how familiar you are with a lot of spoken word, but in the 80s, a lot of it was kind of saying stuff just to kind of be, not to be shocking, but it was a lot to do with I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like
the best way I can think to put it was it was very raw. Like
it
wasn't flowery, it wasn't pretentious, it was just really raw. At least like the first time I forgot somewhere I saw something of one of his spoken word things from like the 90s though. You know, like when he had the Rollins Band and Liar came out, like around that time. That's when I first was really learning about Henry Rollins. So that's when I saw something and I was like, wow, this is really raw compared to poetry readings or readings that I've seen, to where it feels more, even when it is emotional, it's usually not quite as stark, you know?
Yeah, and I liked him more. I mean, you know, when I first heard him in the 90s and up till now, I like it a lot more because he is talking about what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
At this time in his life, he's talking about what's going on in his head.
Right.
And it's ugly. Because he's literally living in a shed in the back of somebody's house. You know, they don't, you know, they don't know when they're touring. He's doing some shows here. He's got some money. He's not got, you know, he doesn't know what he's doing with his life. And there are things that make him angry. And then there's just the part where he's just either in a funk or, you know, whatever it is. And so a lot of it comes out as, you know, it's like an analysis. He'll have a paragraph about, somebody that, you know, that got hit, you know, died in a car crash, and he goes into graphic kind of gory detail of it in a way that it's just like, you're bumming me out. Yeah. But it's what's honestly, like, there's some things in there he says that if it were me, I would, you know, I probably wouldn't, just because it is still, it's where he was at that time. But there's things he says where it's just like, that's pretty, out there, dude. You know, like, that, you know, obviously he wouldn't stand behind that thought process today. Yeah. But it's definitely who he was at that time. So I see the point in leaving it there. He's even apologized to people that he said some kind of not so nice things in there. Yeah. But he's not going to edit it. Yeah. It's the truth. Right. It's who he was then, right? But the reason I brought it up is because I'm just really curious. You know, most people, when we're stuck inside of ourselves, when we're in a place where it's either we're suffering from our addictions, you know, from depression, our anxieties, our fears, whatever it is, you know, he's a unique guy that he wrote it all down. Mm-hmm. I don't usually write that stuff down. Yeah. And I'm just curious about how many people, because I knew a guy. Yeah. Did you? Yeah. Because I'd be really curious if you ever wrote stuff down like this, you know, or if you relate to some of it, not necessarily by word for word, but like the feel of it. Right. You know, what is he, you know, is he capturing because I mean, I knew some weird guys when I took a poetry class in high school, and there was a guy that in there that wrote some really raw, shocking stuff to the point where we all kind of laughed at it afterwards because it was just so over the top. Right. But it also worried me significantly. Yeah. Right. Dude, what is it like living in your head? Yeah. You know? Right. Yeah, because with somebody like that, you never know. Because there are the people who write and they add, they I don't want to say embellish it, but they, you know, like you said, it's so over the top and all this, and it's like if you talk with the person, it's like, oh, you find out a lot of times that their feelings really aren't that extreme. They just kind of do that because of the drama of it, or for the entertainment purposes, you know. Or it's also the release of it. Exactly. You know, it could be a cathartic practice in and of itself. Right. Or maybe, you know, they're a fan of somebody else who does that, you know. That's true, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, or I do this so I don't go out and commit homicide, you know, or whatever. Suicide. Right. And so he's in this place right now where he's really looking at life, and he's talking a lot about killing himself, you know, like, and, you know, would he do it? Sometimes I just feel like dying, you know, going into kind of analysis of it and, you know, other things about that. But and then it becomes a routine, like, especially like when he's on tour. Yeah. It's every journal entry is almost the same. It's just a little different. I could see that. Yeah. Or the nights when he's not on tour, it's the same thing, but it's different. And, you know, like even Nikki Sixx's book, The Heroin Diaries, kind of got to that point too. though it was more partying and drugs and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that was actually a little more. That was actually a little more interesting than this. This is literally a journey into somebody's head, and it's just kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to get it done. It's another one of those books where it's like, boy, I'd love to talk to somebody else that read this.
Yeah.
Somebody read this and
Yeah.
call me.
Because I can tell you that, like back when I used to, like my reason for journaling and stuff back in that time was literally to get it out of my head,
Yeah.
And I wrote a lot about not wanting to be around, that kind of stuff and just dying and all this kind of stuff. And, and talked about killing myself, but I never like analyzed it, which is weird because usually I overanalyze everything, but I never really sat down and tried to, well, why do I feel this way? No, like I never really did that. It's so odd, how I didn't really start doing that stuff until I got closer to being in therapy. For most of it, I was just like, this is how I feel. I think it was just, I was so caught up in this is what I feel like. And I just kept writing it down in the hopes that, it wouldn't, but, years later, I picked up the notebooks that I had written in and I started reading some of it and I was just like, God, I can't, and basically what you're saying now, it's like, this is so hard to read because it's so, like day after day, it's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of mine, like realistically, had I not thrown it away, I could show people where I document all the bullying I went through because I wrote about it, like got made fun of today because of this or whatever. And I'd write that stuff in there and it usually would lead into, I wish I wasn't here kind of a concept or those kind of things. But after reading through some of them and I was just like, this is just too much for me. And I threw it all away because I didn't want to relive it. It's like I already went through it once. I don't want to read it and relive it. And I didn't think about the fact that had I kept it, I potentially could have handed them to people who were curious about what I had gone through, and been like, here, here's in my own words at the time, this is what I was feeling.
Yeah.
But you're right. I bet for somebody who hasn't been through that or something, or even just whoever, it's probably so hard to sit and read that because it really is. It's like negative after negative after and day after day, the same, verbiage basically, I'm sure it gets really old, or just heavy, whichever. So.
The interesting part has been seeing his development as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
Yeah.
The tour stuff is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had my impressions of, we all had our impressions of what punk rock was in the early 80s. And so everyone has their ideas of what punk rock was in the 80s. But it's, when a genre is starting, that usually the bands and the musicians there are just doing what they do. Mm-hmm. And then other people come in and try to define it and say that this is the real and this is the fake and this is the, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that part's been really interesting in the story about how, Henry Rollins had long hair in the 80s. Oh, well, you're not punk.
Yeah.
Or, you're a sellout now because you're a rock star. And the guy's like, trying to live off $1 a day.
Yeah.
That even, I'm a real rock star. And then his own attitude of like, you couldn't work half as hard as I do, every day for, I bleed for this, the violence it shows and all that stuff. And so that part's been kind of cool, but.
What was that? Sorry.
Okay. So that part's been cool about the story, but yeah, I have some really cool books I want to get to after this, and I just really feel like I need to get through this,
That certainly doesn't help,
Yeah, and there's some really good books that I know that are going to be exciting, and I'm going to super dive into, and I'm just like, God, I'm committed to this. So,
I'm the same as you though. Like, I don't, like when I'm going through a book, like even if I'm struggling through the book, I won't put the book down and just leave it alone. It's like, I gotta finish this book.
I mean, if it was a piece of fiction, I guess it'd be one thing.
Uh-huh.
But it's legitimately someone's writing, and I listen to his podcast, Henry and Heidi, and he's a different guy now, and I really enjoy listening to him, and I enjoy his shows and that kind of stuff. So it's been a kind of a fun dive. But there's bands that say, "Oh, we carry this book with us when we're on tour," and I'm just like, why? Why would you get them?
Right.
I mean, in a lot of ways, I guess it could be a handbook, but anyhow, boy, am I tangenting right now.
That's fine. You're right though. It could be a handbook, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I know, obviously he's been successful, but it's like, I don't know that I would want to take his road, like he was, from the stuff I read, it sounds like it was not an easy path for a lot of it, and
no, it really wasn't. It really wasn't.
And really, even at his peak, like, people know who he is. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people know who he is, but it's like, they hit before, like in the 90s and stuff, he had the one hit and stuff, and people went to the talking stuff, and he was on MTV quite a bit, but it was like, it just seemed like, he was probably, the way a lot of people like him tend to be is they tend to choose the path of most resistance, He
says that in here where, unless he's literally, and that's where I think a lot of the cutting came from.
Yeah.
Where this self-inflicted pain, where he literally would find a shard of glass and bang himself in the chest with it because he needed to feel. Yeah. Before the show, because that's when he felt most alive.
Right.
Was when, was when he was literally at war.
Right.
And I get that. I get that and there's so much. There's the other part about that I think it's fascinating is I'd love to hear, an actual, someone with, some mental health, education or whatever, because there's PTSD in there. There's so many things in there that are going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of it I do relate to. I just, as a young, when I was in my early 20s, I just did it differently. Oh, and that was the other thing that I listened to. I was listening to Marin today, and a podcast he did this last week with what's her Edie. Yeah, she was on what's the mob TV show that everyone loved? Sopranos, that's it.
Yeah.
She was on that.
Edie, was it Falco or something
Falco,
like that?
That's it, yeah. So she's sober. She's been sober for like 25 years. And Marin is, he's 18 years, whatever. So they talked a little bit about sobriety, and our good friend Matthew, who does, what's his new podcast? The Waffle
Sunday?
The Waffle Hour or something? Waffle Sundays,
Waffle
is that
Sundays,
it?
Yeah.
With his kid, which I just love.
Yeah.
He'd sent me a message about it and said, "Hey, check this out. I got a lot out of it." And one of the things that she shared about, and it was this idea that I don't deserve the life that I have. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like I don't deserve it.
Right.
Or I don't deserve this much joy. I don't deserve this much abundance. And she's like, I don't even like using these terms, but they're the words I've learned and they apply, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. Like, what I share here with you guys is typically something I've already heard before. All the terminology and the jargon, for lack of a better term, I mean, it's basically what it is, jargon.
Right.
We use mental health jargon. We use, sobriety jargon. All these things, I don't know any other way to describe it because this is what I've learned, right? Mm. And it was, I loved what they had to say. I love that type of humility, I guess, in that I'm grateful for my recovery, and if life was fair, I'd be dead. That kind of idea.
Yeah.
If life was really fair, this alcoholic would have gotten a DUI and died.
Yeah, I see what
that
you mean.
kind of concept. Mm-hmm. But look where I am. I have this wonderful career. I have a beautiful family. I have all this stuff, and they say like I don't deserve this. And I've thought about it today where I've never said that.
Yeah.
I don't share that because not that I deserve what I have, but I think I worked for a lot of it.
Right.
And I try to share it with other people. I try to do my part to give back what was given to me.
Yeah.
In whatever way I can. And I guess it ties into kind of the karma idea that I get back what I put in. And yes, I am blessed. You know, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
About being blessed to have this stuff. But it was just an interesting thing to hear like this. I don't deserve it.
Well, it seems like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong because I'm not in the same mindset, but it seems like, okay, obviously something led you to drink originally. You know, you were masking whatever pain or whatever with drink, there. So I can see where if it was any sort of like a confidence issue or something that like before, like you didn't like yourself or whatever, so you would drink, like I could see where that could, and then once you no longer have that drink, that feeling is still there, you know, because all you've done is mask it for all these years. You know, now it's still there. Like, I could see where some people would easily have that feeling. Because, like, a good example would be like me. I've had low self-esteem and I haven't liked myself at various times. So if I were drinking for years and years and then all of a sudden I quit, well, I haven't solved the other problem. You know,
yeah.
So I could see where I could come out and still feel that way, that, you know, you're not used to things going your way because maybe that's why you started whatever in the first place, was because you felt you were being dealt, you know, whatever hand you were, you know, and so I can see that. I can kind of identify with that because I really think that if all of a sudden things started going crazy, like if all of a sudden the podcast took off and was super successful and this and that, and I'd probably have some of those feelings too because I'm very much the look around the corner for the next bad thing kind of person. You know, like I'm fighting against that, but that's the way I've been for years is, you know, whenever something good happens, it's like, okay, there's going to be the balance, you know, and the thing is that isn't really how it works. It's just that you focus on that negative and you're not paying attention to the positive. So you don't really see that there's a lot of times where good things just happen and then life is just okay afterward. Like you don't have like a big catastrophic event to balance it or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Like, and like, to kind of bring this around full circle is I've listened to a bunch of Nikki Sixx podcasts from Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, who wrote the Heroin Diaries.
Right.
And he did a show with Dean Del Rey on his Let There Be Talk. And you know, he talks a lot about his recovery. It's a big deal to him, right? It's a huge deal. And he shared a lot about what it was like to write. This was great for me. And you'd get this from an artist standpoint, the difference between writing when, you know, how do you write? How do you create? What do you do?
Yeah.
The process stuff. He talked specifically about process. He actually gave total insight on how he writes music. You would love it from the process junkie standpoint. But when I hear Nikki Sixx, I don't hear a guy that is still carrying around the weight of his past.
Yeah.
I hear a guy that is firmly in the present.
Right.
And what he can do. And sometimes that's where I think about when I hear this, like, I don't deserve this, is like, that well, you're still holding on to the past.
Yep.
You know, it's like when I talked about my mom, you know, having some low expectations of me with regard to the reception. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, she can do that. She got the effects of my past.
Yeah.
I don't anymore. But I'm not going to hold it against anybody that does because I have to move on. Yep. That's why a lot of my friends too. There's certain
really
friends
part
I
of
choose
your
not
recovery.
to talk to.
Yeah, it's really part of the recovery because if you don't, kind of going like with what I was saying, to where if you had a seed problem and then alcohol was your mask or whatever for it, once you emerge from the alcohol, you know, or, you know, the drinking, if you still have that other problem, you still have a problem to deal with. You know, you know, that's still part of the recovery. Now it's a different type of recovery, but now you have to, you know, try to get yourself, you know, again, it's no different than, you know, like a lot of people that have like those, bypass surgeries for their stomachs. You know, a lot of times they want them to go see a psychologist afterward to make sure that it wasn't like, because if it was an emotional eating problem, having that surgery doesn't solve your emotional eating. All it does is it makes you lose weight. That's all it, you know, so you still need to do that. Otherwise, you're going to start eating again at some point and either making yourself sick or undoing what they've done. So kind of the same thing, you know, if you have a problem hating yourself, I would think you probably would be more likely to maybe fall off the wagon at some point than if you keep working on yourself and also can get to where, like you were saying, you're living in the moment, you know, rather than living behind you or you know, future casting.
That's you know? Where I love the phrase, like the circus left town, but the monkey's still on my back.
Yeah, really. I can see that though. Go ahead.
Yeah. It was just interesting that you bring the bypass thing. It's kind of interesting because they do a lot of counseling beforehand.
Exactly.
They're required to do 6 months to a year of various behavioral work before they even get the physical stuff done. And isn't it funny how so much with alcoholism and all that kind of stuff, it's backwards. It's the reverse of that. You do the physical stuff. Okay, now we need to work on you. And you're just like, I am a frayed nerve right now, man. You need to work on me.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
That's why people fail, you know.
Yeah.
That was, you know, I'll tell you one thing that something that Courtney shared on the Shrink to Shrink podcast was the idea that, a lot of people who get onto antidepressants, it's because suicide is a side effect of antidepressants because the antidepressants suddenly give you the energy to go and actually kill yourself.
Oh, wow. I had never thought about something like that before.
I know.
Wow.
And that was right.
Yeah.
And so the same thing, like I know a lot of alcoholics who killed themselves in sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were, before they were too drunk, well, they were trying to drink themselves to a slow death.
Right, yeah.
But they got sober, they got, their life kind of together, but that darkness was still there.
Right.
And now they actually could do something about it.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing, it's like the road to recovery, again, like in, a lot of people's situations, it isn't just removing the drink from your hand. You know, it's also, you gotta do work on you mentally, because even if nothing else, I mean, you've got to deal with the fact, like you were saying, when you came out of, or, you know, finally got sober, now you had to experience the world anew, you know? Now it's, oh, I have to feel feelings, I have to deal with this, I have to, you know? And, that's kind of, cause I was saying the same thing with depression, is that when you're in your lowest pits and stuff, you know, a lot of times you're apathetic and all this, and it's like, some of this stuff over time, it's like, I'm retraining myself of how to care about some things again, trying to find my passion, or, you know, relighting those torches that have been extinguished. And it's weird because it really is like you're, for lack of a better term, being born again kind of a thing. Like you're going through everything for the first time again, you know? Yeah.
Like think about it. It doesn't matter whether it's depression or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is. When we're fully deep in it, our world is very small.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
It's very small. It is not expansive at all. And then as we come out of it, all of a sudden that world gets a little bit bigger, and you're kind of going, I don't know if I want this, you know? And,
and you get anxiety to go with it too. And for some people, it's like, now it's like, well, how do I handle the anxiety? Because before I would have a drink, or I would this or that, or I'd run and hide, or, you know, now how do I handle this, you know?
Or you're just so depressed that it didn't matter.
Right, yeah. It's almost like somebody just shoves you outside and locks the door behind you, you know, and you're like,
yeah. Yeah. When that was one of the things I wrote down when he said that. I was like, whoa, I never thought about that with that's why suicide is a side effect of antidepressants.
Yeah, and I'm sure he didn't mean that all the time, but
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he didn't, but he talked about a lot it was, people who suffer from depression just don't have the energy to go through with it.
Yeah, a lot of time. Wow, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. That is, you know, wow.
All right, so enough about me, man.
Wow. Well, really quick, even though this isn't about you or I, but it's very on topic, which was I wanted to just talk for a second again about how, like we found out this week that Chester Bennington of Lincoln Park, it looks like he died of suicide. And, you know, it's always amazing. And I've said this, I think, almost every time some celebrity has died this way. It's always amazing to me what gets posted by people afterward. You know, because first of all, obviously, there's tons of love for the guy. A lot of people, you know, really liked him and stuff. But, I've seen a lot of the, he's weak, he's a coward, selfish, those things that always pop back up because people don't understand. I've also seen other things that are showing up more and more, and I like this because that shows that the dialogue is opening more, which is people are like, why is it everybody wants to talk about, someone's suicide, but they're not willing to talk about their depression? And I was like, that's a great point, because suicide ends up being the end of it. Like, when someone reveals depression to you, that's the time to catch it. That's the time to help them talk about it. And, because those kind of things, the biggest thing is for a person with depression to not feel alone, and to know that there's help and there's stuff out there, because that's when a lot of them, now granted, look, some people can have all that, they can know all those things, and still this, depression's so awful that it still can make you feel like, you have no choice but to kill yourself. So obviously, as we always say on here, get a hold of a suicide prevention hotline number, or, text the crisis line, the one that's 741-741. I believe if you text help to it, or something like that, I don't know. You can find out if you just go on Google and type in 741-741, it'll, the thing will pop up. I think there's a phone number associated with it too. I just don't remember off the top of my head. But what's interesting to me also with this is, and it's really tough as a creative person, you can create something that you are not feeling right then, or that you felt in the past, or whatever. Like, when you're writing lyrics, you can write lyrics about, like, a past breakup, or depression, or whatever. Maybe you're not feeling those things immediately, but it's interesting how many of his songs seem to really focus around kind of pain in the end, And again, if you look at, like, Chris Cornell, there's a good amount of his lyrics that also, and it's, of course, because you're writing from your heart, basically, but at the same time, it almost makes you wonder, it's like, should these things be red flags, or do you just take them as entertainment?
It's a good question. I think really does tie in with that 13 Reasons too, in a lot of ways, because there's so much in there that they talk about as, her making the films for everybody was cathartic to a degree, where after she was finished, she was like, maybe it is worth living. Maybe life is worth living. She reaches out one last time, doesn't get the response she wants, and goes, all right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of, that they talk a lot about when do you step in?
Right.
When do you step in as a friend? When do you step in as a professional? That kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of good information on that, and some real concrete tips about key words that are said. This idea that coming out and saying, do you want to kill yourself? Like, they were talking about how, a lot of people say, you shouldn't say that because you're going to give a person an idea.
No.
And their response was no. No. When you use those words, those specific words, do you want to kill yourself? Typically the response is no.
Right.
Because it's an abrupt word.
Right. And
you're going to get you're going to get iffy or a no.
Right. A lot of people don't understand that, and I've posted links to, there was something on The Mighty that I read about it, and I thought it was a really good read about how there's a difference between, God, how was it worded? It's something like, there's a difference between wanting to die and willingness to kill yourself. There's a big step in between there, even though it semantically doesn't seem like a whole lot different. There's a huge difference. And I've been in my therapist's office almost every time I go. I have to fill out a form that's basically, it's each one's got a ratings thing. How have you felt over the last few weeks or month or whatever it is? Yep. And if, like, there's one of the questions is, have you had thoughts of dying or not being here anymore, those kind of things. And if it's a higher number, the first thing when my therapist is reading through it, she always will go, have you had thoughts of suicide? And then I'll answer, and then she'll be, she'll see that and be like, have you thought of harming yourself? And if I answer yes, like the one time I did, because that one medicine I had was really altering my thought process, and it was making me feel that way, And I told her, yes, the first thing she said is, do you think you need to be admitted to the hospital? And then she asked me some other questions. And basically, I think those were her looking for, does he seem like he may hurt himself or others? Because if so, it's time to get him into a hospital and get him help, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. She did exactly what she should have done, you know? Yeah.
And that's what they talked about on the podcast, which is like, if they hear those words, you know, they're calling,
right.
They're calling the appropriate authorities to get you locked up, basically.
Yeah.
And that you as a friend, if you hear that, you should do the same.
Yeah.
Because there are certain, you know, there's gray areas and then there's absolutes, and that's one of their absolutes is if these words come out, it's serious business. They don't mess around.
Yeah, you have to take it as serious, even if the person is I hate to use the term, but you know, if they're a drama king or queen or whatever, you know, it's like, even if it's that, you still should act on it, you know. But it's difficult to say to someone, but this is the kind of language and this is the kind of conversations that need to be had, you know.
Yep.
Suicide needs to stop being a taboo subject. And again, unfortunately, you know, with all the celebrities that have been essentially killing themselves here, we're having more conversations, but on one hand, we're having more conversations, but it's like, I don't know if overall, if the conversation is still expanding, or if we're having a conversation for 2 weeks and then we don't have it anymore. You know? And that's the part that concerns me a little bit.
That's so here's the kind of to me it's kind of the hard part of the rub on this is that, you know, unless you have it in your life, you have either a loved one, you have a child, you have a parent, you have, you know, whatever it is, unless you have somebody directly in your life that is suffering from depression or has gone through these things or is having just a difficult time of it, we're not going to think about it.
Mm-mm.
It's gone. It's gone the next week. But for those people that have somebody in their lives that this is part of it, then it is very relevant.
Yeah.
And the idea of, you know, you don't have to have suicides to keep the conversation going.
Right.
There's other ways of doing it, and I think that's what this show was about was to do that.
Yeah.
But to me, like you brought up the idea of the lyrics, the lyrics could be no different than we talked about writing journals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a release, expressing how you feel at that time.
Right.
Maybe it's just a cycle, whatever it is. You know, the question becomes is when do you step in? And I think there are very specific. That's when there's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's why I was really happy to hear this and to hear people talk about it from I guess, you know, lack of a better, from a clinical standpoint, you know, professional standpoint, is to hear like, okay, this is the conversation we have and why we have it.
Yeah.
These are the words that we say and why we say them.
Mm-hmm.
Is because we are actively trying to prevent this from happening.
Yeah, and again,
you know,
I fully understand it's one of those things too that, you know, again, people don't tend to, like, how do you start a conversation about that? That's how a lot of people are uncomfortable, you know, so, yeah.
And there's the part of as they also shared about, it's like, you don't always get to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You know, many times when you have the conversation, it was reaching out,
mm-hmm.
but it wasn't serious. Then there are times where you never got to have the conversation and they went through with it.
Yep.
And you wouldn't have known. And that was shared. And it's like, ooh, you know, and that's been kind of my experience with people that I know that, you know, people around me that have gone and done it. It's like, yeah, there was all the real screaming, outrageous, you know, calls for help. But when they went through with it, it seemed like a normal day.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like with me, that's, you know, I kept everything so hidden that, you know, the few times when I, you know, was really kind of pushing that way and thought about it, if I had followed through on it, nobody would have known. You know, it would have just been there, and then it would have been, like, as people were digging through them, they would have found those journals that I had written in.
Yep.
And then been like, oh my God, all of this is here. And, you know, like, it was right under our nose, basically. But again, it was hidden. I didn't leave them. I didn't leave those journals laying on the coffee table. You know, they were always in my room or in my book bag or whatever. You know, they were generally with me or near me or whatever. And, you know, so you're right. So nobody would have got to have that conversation with me if I had gone through with it, you know, and that's, you know, that again, whenever you see those, it's like, that's how awful the disease is or the illness is. I mean, you know, because had I reached out to people, I know the people in my life would have talked to me about it or helped me get help, you know, and, it was just a matter of, I didn't want anyone to know. You know, yeah. I didn't want, and really what it came down to is, again, like with, you know, depression, it's real common that you don't want to be a burden. And that was it, you know, I don't want to make other people feel bad or you think, you know, nobody wants to hear you, you know, wah all the time. And, you know, so you just keep it to yourself. And again, if you're feeling either of those ways, you're wrong. I can't think of a better way to say it other than you're just wrong. There's somebody out there who will listen to you. Again, even if everyone close to you is the type to be like, quit your whining, there's therapists out there, there's support systems and groups out there. There's random internet strangers who will listen to you, you know?
Yep.
I mean,
yep, that's it.
There are people who are willing to help, you know, so please always reach out. I know it's super hard. You know, like I said, it took me way too long to do it, so that's why I keep preaching on here to, you know, don't be like Brian. you know, don't wait 20 years, you know. I mean, you gotta be ready, you know. You've gotta be ready to go through with working on yourself and getting help, but, you know, if you're at a low point, reach out to somebody. You know, someone will listen to you.
And for those people who are the ones that end up, you know, the families and those people that end up being the, you know, having to deal with the after effects and that kind of stuff, is educate yourself as much as you can. You know, that's what I really learned this week listening to listening to podcasts. It's information. Information is good to have, because I want to, if I ever, you know, I don't want to be sitting there empty handed if somebody ever comes up to me, or if I encounter somebody that's having those thoughts or wants to have that conversation with me. Yeah. I want to be able to at least have something to say.
Right. That's like me, you know, I've got whatever I've read and learned, but I also am very much if I understand it's over my pay grade, you know, I'm like, here's some numbers or whatever, cause this is above, you know, above what I can do to help you, you know, but that's still helping, you know, I'm still trying to facilitate them getting help in some way. So it's, like you said, that's so key. And it is, so many people don't know what to look for. They, you know, like with depression and stuff, they look for the real big obvious signs, but those generally aren't the dangerous signs, you know?
Exactly.
And with potential suicides, the signs are really, sometimes they're really slight changes, but you wouldn't notice them. Sometimes they're big changes, you know, so it just helps if you can at least have an overview on it, you know, cause, you know, maybe, you know, like Henno and I, we don't have kids, you know, but I know other people who have kids, and if they tell me something that sends off a red flag in my head, you know, because I've read or I know something, I'll certainly say something, you know, like, hey, you might want to talk to him about whatever, you know, and that was what with that 13 Reasons Why show, that's what I was telling people, is I was like, if you watch it, I was like, use it as a catalyst to have a conversation with your kids. You know?
Yeah, that was one of the things that Courtney shared on there too, was that he's like, I'm not my kid's confidant.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be, but when the kid got to high school age, somebody else is now.
Yep.
Okay, so I need to go find out who that person is and say, hey, if you ever hear anything, you know, will you let me know?
Right.
That kind of a thing. And I was like, wow, that's another amazing point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, who is...
Well, also, you know, one of the biggest things I thought that they brought up in that show, that's a great thing for people to read or to catch up on, especially for parents, is the bullying that's done in schools now is not the same as it was when I was in school or whatever, because we didn't have the internet to 24/7 bully someone with. So learn how kids are doing that and talk to your kids about that as well, because that's something that's super easy for people to overlook because it's not part of their life in the same way.
It's true.
You know, so, you know, that's the kind of stuff sometimes that it's, you know, cause literally it's something I hadn't even thought about, you know, and like I said, I was bullied like crazy growing up. But when they brought that up and I was like, wow, I hadn't even thought, you know, cause a lot of the bullying is still going to be the same, you know, you're a nerd, you're this, you're that, you know, whatever. But,
yeah.
But then, like I said, I didn't think about it, you know, at 3:00 or whatever, we leave school. Once I'm off the bus, there's no chance of me getting bullied again until the next morning, you know? But now with Facebook, Twitter, all this other stuff, they can be harassed all night long. So
there could be stuff going on. There's that, you know, we talk about the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Like there could be a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background behind you, and you have no idea what's going on, and it's at such a different scale now.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing that happened when we were kids is, okay, maybe a few of your friends were you know, talking about you were doing something behind your back. Now it could literally be hundreds of people.
It could be the whole school talking about you behind your back, and and it's a lot, since some sites allow for anonymity, so it can be even more ruthless than before too. You know, so yeah, there's a lot of good lessons there. It's like, you know, and I'm sure there's stuff on the internet to read, or if not, contact like a psychologist or something and be like, hey, you know, I want to, you know, what should I be on top of because of my kid or whatever, those kind of things, you know, and try to, because I'm sure, you know, I'm sure being a parent's hard enough, you know, it's like, but then there's this stuff that might be completely off your radar, and that could be some of the stuff that's the most dangerous, you know. And, cause like I said, you know, we don't think about it that way, even though adults get trolled all the time online, yeah, you know, but, I could see where people wouldn't think about that. You know, like I said, I didn't even give that a consideration when I watched that show until they mention it in, I don't think it was in the show. I think it's in, there's like another little hour-long or half-hour-long, thing where they talk about why they made some of the decisions on the show that they did. And that when they brought that up, and I was like, huh, you know, cause it is a whole new system of bullying. So.
Yeah. And that's the part where the show is, you know, you'd have to have some knowledge and some expertise to get something out of the show. I think the education comes in like that in the follow up. Is basically what it. You know, that's where they dive into what happened, what was it about this, and that's why I think it's worth having, you know, a podcast with people that actually have some expertise in this and analyze it too, because then you're like, oh, okay, that's what happened there.
That was why that's why I reached out to Courtney and was like, hey, are you guys going to do this? Because you know, I mean, it just seemed like a perfect pick for them to do, you know, because of what they do professionally and what that, and on their podcast, everything just melds there. And I like that because like you and I talked, and I was like, I would love to talk about this, but we're not qualified as far as like the professional level stuff. We can obviously talk about what we, you know, picked up from the show. And, I was so happy when he responded with, you know, yeah, we're going to do it. I was like, cool. Cause, you know, I have a lot that I liked about the show. I had a lot that I didn't like about the show. And I was, you know, plus I thought it'd be great then to have an analysis of, well, here's what you should do. Here's where you can learn from the show. That's beautiful. I'm so glad they did it.
Yeah. And it changed even it changed so many of my initial opinions because I was being critical of this as a piece of art rather than what there was in there that we could learn.
Yeah.
And they showed us what we can learn from this, and it changed how I viewed this as a piece of art. It's like, okay, now to me, it was a worthwhile endeavor.
Right.
You know, if we get this opportunity to follow up and get something out of it.
Yeah. And I love that.
It's a big deal.
And I actually was reading a short blurb of something earlier talking about how there's a lot of Netflix shows that are really starting to try to open the door for more mental illness conversations. And that's true. Like Maria Bamford's show, where she talks about being bipolar, and showing kind of how it affects her life. And there's been other shows that they've had where they've had characters with depression. And, even talked about, it wasn't on Netflix, but that You're the Worst show, where they really are showing PTSD and they're showing depression on there. And it's like, I'm so glad that people are that we're in a point to where TV shows can do this,
Yes.
Because I'll bet there's a lot of people who probably recognize something and was like, oh, I know somebody who, acts that way or does that. And it's, can kind of turn a light on sometimes, that you wouldn't think of, because a lot of times people don't want to share, because they don't want to, we were taught for so long that, especially, Jen mentioned this, I think, or on here or something that, or maybe it was somebody else I was talking with, I can't remember, but it was like, as a woman, it was Jen with her being bipolar, that as a woman, you don't want to show any weakness, because you're already judged differently in a lot of workplaces, and it's true, no matter who you are. Again, you could be a man too, and you don't want to necessarily show a mental illness because, well, maybe they'll pass me over because, they'll think you're unstable or you're not reliable or whatever. And, and that sucks. That should not exist,
Yeah.
So you should be able to feel open about this as much as you want to, because it is part of who you are,
There was one thing that I wrote down. They talked about how, young, and I remember this too. It's like young people don't have a scope of time. Everything is that moment.
Yeah.
That this is going to mark. Everything is permanent. Nothing's temporary.
Yeah. This everything is the worst thing ever. Yeah.
Right. And I've thought we've done it. I've talked about this before. It's like, most of us got to this point now where we can say, oh, that wasn't personal. It's not permanent.
Right.
It's like, but everything when you're that way is like that. But, and that this idea, that the kids just don't have they just don't have that vision to say, and this is not who you are. In 6 years, you're going to be somebody completely else, or even in 3 years, this all goes away, or 2 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I could relate to it because that's always how I felt when I got sober.
Yeah.
And I've had people express that to me when they're going through recovery, is they're in this place where they're like, yeah, but they believe that this is the way it's going to be. This is who I am. It's never going to get better. The mountain that is on top of them cannot possibly be removed.
Right.
And I was like, well, I get that. I relate to that. I understand what that's like.
Yep.
And that sometimes that others who have been through it can offer a sense of hope and say, hey, I was exactly the same way. This is how I felt.
Yeah.
But this is how it is today. And it didn't take long.
Right. Well, and not to mention, like when you're in school, like, as you get older, you tend to have friends that you don't work with. You tend to have some friends that you do work with or whatever. But when you're in school, all your friends are pretty much your schoolmates. So everything going on, pretty much your whole day involves that. So when something happens, it kind of is more catastrophic than as you get older, cause like you said, I mean, you gain perspective and time, and plus, but if like when you get older, a lot of times if somebody annoys you at work or whatever, you can kind of walk away from that, to some extent. At school, you can't. Kind of a thing, cause you're around them, and then it's like, well, if we go hang out, and it's, it's like your world revolves around that small area that, as your world expands, everything expands a little bit. And plus, like you said, obviously time is the biggest thing, because you realize that life has ebbs and flows, that there are times that life's you really hard and it stinks, And then sometimes life is just average, and other times, maybe you'll have a real good run for a while, but you don't see that as a teenager, because really you don't run into true conflict until you hit that age, and then everything seems like a big conflict because you're starting to experience more adult things. Those things are leaking into your world, so everything really, like I said, everything does seem more catastrophic to you because you just don't have that perspective of, like you said, in 5 years, you're going to look back at this and go, God, I can't believe how emotional I was over that guy or girl, and or whatever.
I thought it was the end of the world, and the reality was 6 months later, I'd completely forgotten it even happened.
Nobody else will love me again,
Yeah, and same thing goes with we've talked we talked about grief recently.
Mm-hmm.
It's that same thing. Like, I can get through this. I will get past this.
Yeah.
When we're not, when we are suffering from depression and we have anxieties or we have addictions or whatever it is, it's very easy to just dive into our isms
mm-hmm.
and not get it's just how it is, we can't see it. We absolutely cannot see that there's an outside of this tunnel.
Right.
That there's light at some point.
Yeah.
It's just a deep, dark tunnel, and it's just easier to fall deeper into it and go into what's familiar than to brave forward with some hope that I can get to the other side of this.
Well, that's the thing too. A lot of people don't get the reason that this is such a hard trek for some people is that you can't, especially if you have like depression, anxiety, kind of a two thing. It's like everything new you're going to do gives you huge amounts of anxiety, and the depression is going, you can't do this. Right?
Yep.
So the only way to not fall deeper into it is to, like you said, to brave it and move forward. And it's like, that's the hardest thing in the world for you to do, is to move forward. And so it's, people don't understand that it's like that's why sometimes just doing normal stuff can make you exhausted at the end of the day. Because, the whole time you're fighting against your head going, you're gonna fail, this isn't gonna work, blah, 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 or why are you doing this? It's just gonna turn out bad. They're gonna think this about you. And it's just a constant grinding of your own brain, So by the end of the day, if you do succeed something, sometimes you can't even really, celebrate your success because you're so exhausted from the fight, basically, It's
true, yeah. Every moment that you're trying to do what you're supposed to do,
mm-hmm.
is the greatest challenge.
Yeah, everything in your brain
because
is
you're
telling
fighting
you,
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I absolutely remember that. I remember those moments where, it was just constant. It was just fear.
Yeah.
It was never-ending fear, and it takes a lot out of you, and that's that's why a lot of I might as well just say it now. That's why I've done a lot of nothing. Like on my weekend, I took a lot of time where I just sat down and I was in a that wasn't necessarily a quiet place, but where I was just not allowing this stuff to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And make me feel like that. I was taking an active choice to step away from the volume and the noise,
which is really tough to do.
Or at least approach it in a way that is, where it's my choice.
Yeah.
This noise I can handle right now because I'm prepared for this.
Right.
But I'm not going to go put myself into this one, and that way I give myself the kind of downtime, recovery time, whatever, to get myself fired up for when I'm back in it.
Yeah.
Where I don't have a choice, which is work, basically.
It is, yeah.
I don't get to avoid the emergency or the hectic situation. That's
right.
I don't get to avoid that. I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I have to deal with a person or many people. So I better be ready.
Yeah.
And I better not. It comes back to that thing of like, I better be making some deposits into the savings account.
Yeah.
The savings that the reserve, the reservoir that I can tap into.
That's been a real big theme for my conversations with people this week. Because again, last week I mentioned that my nephew died unexpectedly, and this past week was the showing, and obviously really hard for everybody to go through and all that kind of stuff. And I was making, you know, walking around as I was talking with people. Like I talked to my brother-in-law and like, have you eaten? Talk to my sister. Have you eaten? Have you taken your medicines? Have you, you know, done what you need to do? And when I found out that she hadn't been eating much, it's like, you know, look, I understand, you know, cause when something like this happens, you really don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like eating. You don't feel like any of it. And you just kind of go into, survival mode and accept that you're skipping some of the survival part, you know, and, that's why, you know, when I was talking with her, you know, before I left the funeral home, I, you know, gave her a hug and I was like, you better eat because you can't help yourself get over this and get better if you're not eating, you know, like you have to have that energy. You've got to have your body needs these things. And I'm like, and you still have 2 kids, you know, you've got people who are going to look to you and stuff like that just as well as for your own sake, you know, like again, it's, you know, you hate to in a time like that be like, hey, you need to be selfish, but at the same time, you need to be selfish, you know, when it comes to make sure you eat, make sure make sure you do the bare survival things. And I kept going over that. And, you know, like I said, you know, throughout the day, during the time I was there, I said it a few times to her, or even my mom was there, because my mom was there all day. And I'd go up and, you know, hey, did you bring your medicine with you? Did you take it? Are you, you know, my mom's diabetic. So it's like, you know, have you eaten? Because it's really important for diabetics to, you know, to not let their blood sugar drop and stuff, you know. So I was going through that with everybody and just like, make sure you're doing this stuff. And it's like, I know you don't want to, I know you don't feel like it, but, you know, get a little bit of nourishment. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just, you know, get something in there and make sure you're taking care of yourself. Cause like you said, it's like, you know, you can't, we've said countless times on here, you know, you can't be of service to others, you know, if you don't take care of yourself. Again, it goes to the, you know, the airplane situation with the masks, you know, put your mask on, take a couple of breaths, then apply the masks to other people. So, you know, it's all the same kind of situation.
So how did it feel for you to be doing that?
It was weird, you know, but at the same time, I'm very much the type that when life hits crisis mode, usually I'm pretty like, okay, what needs to be done? This needs to be done. This, you know, it's like I go into an analytical situation and I just am about getting whatever needs to be done. And, you know, it's almost like in a lot of ways I shut my emotions off and go into like robot mode, you know? And I've always kind of been that way. But it doesn't
sound robotic to me. It sounds very
it's weird.
Compassionate.
Yeah, right. But it's, you know, it's very much, I did the same thing like when my dad died. I was going around and, you know, I made phone calls and was walking around the house and, are you okay? Do you need anything? You know, and Jen was doing that too. You know, it was just weird how in my head I was basically shutting off. Like, I didn't sit around and cry with everybody. I was more like, what needs done? Okay, I'll do it. I'll do this. You know, like, making sure whatever had to be done was done. And then, you know, then later on, once there was calm, then I had my, you know, my real emotional moments, basically. But, you know, that's kind of the way I've always been. So, you know, I don't know if that's good or bad, but, you know, it's always worked for me through crises, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's, you know, it's one of those things that no matter what anybody said to anybody, you know, it wasn't going to really improve the situation, you know, because it just sucked. So yeah.
And that was that last weekend?
Yeah, or? last Monday. This past Monday is when it happened. This past
Monday.
Yeah. And actually, you know, I want to say I posted a GoFundMe link because unfortunately he didn't have life insurance, and just out of nowhere, you know, it's tough to pull the kind of money out for a funeral. And I just want to say thank you to anybody who's listening. If you retweeted or if you donated or anything like that, you know, it's whatever help they can get is going to make a huge difference for them, because neither one of my brother or my brother-in-law or sister are really, you know, they're not in a position to just out of pocket this. So it's, you know, whatever they get will be a huge help. So thank you to everyone who did that. Or if you reached out and, with condolences or, any of that kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. And so does my family. So I want to make sure I covered that too. I almost forgot about it. So yeah, that's basically all about all that happened to me this week. The rest of the week was pretty, like I was telling you before we started recording, it's just been awful here. Actually, no, it was while we were recording, whatever. It was just been awful, hot, humid, and I'm just like, nope. I don't play well with that kind of weather, so I tend to stay out of it.
We're supposed to have some. Oh, that just reminded. We're supposed to have some thunderstorms coming in a couple of days, which I'm actually looking forward to. So I'd love to have a little rain, with that fire that I just realized is raging east of us, that'll be really good too.
Yeah.
Of course, the lightning strikes aren't so good, but
right. Not if it's been dry and everything. Yeah. Hopefully the rain hits.
But hopefully we have some good rain that'll help the firefighters, because it was like a nuclear mushroom cloud going up. I mean, with it's just yellow grass out there, and we have wind. I mean, it's just a fire out of control.
Right.
Luckily it's not blowing this way. But that we've just had this very consistent weather where it's just sunny and very warm. And I find that you're talking about, like, you get to that afternoon period where you get outside, I'll have to go to the store, and I'll jump in the car, and it takes a while for the air conditioning to even make a difference, you know?
Yeah.
And I get back and I'm like, okay, what were all those things I said I was going to do this weekend? No. I don't even remember what they were.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing too. It's been weird because, along with the heat and the humidity we've had a good amount of rain. Like, I think over this past weekend, like the weekend we're in right now, I think they were talking that we could get up to 3 or 4 inches of rain across a couple days, just, and it was like, it's, when it rains here, it's been pouring rain. Like, no sprinkles, I mean, it starts raining and it's just a dumping rain, and it's always like, when you see it, it's always weird, how you can look in one part of the country, like out by you, and it's like, boy, we'd like to have some rain out here, and here I'm like, okay, enough,
Yeah.
You see your street flooding, and, it's like you wish you could just, push the cloud towards you guys, to help out, So, yeah.
Well, there's a reason they call it Sun Valley, because even though we're in the mountains and we have some of that mountain effect thunderstorms, for the most part it's just sunny here.
Yeah. Which, usually is probably not a bad thing, but when you've got a raging fire behind you, it's like, maybe some, we're from a purely selfish standpoint, we've been really lucky because we've had, the last couple of years, we've had a lot of fires that have blown a lot of smoke in the area. Yeah.
And it does kill our tourism. I mean, it just does.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to be out there riding their bikes when it's all hazy, smoky.
Sure, yeah.
Nope, and so we had the big Allen and Company conference they do at Sun Valley every year, and everyone loved it. And we had a couple of hazy days from some little local fires, but for the most part, it's just been clear, and that's good for our economy.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's good, at least. I mean,
yeah.
So, all right. Well,
that was kind of a lot of random and sundry.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, we didn't even get to the topic we were going to talk about. So, and we're over an hour. So,
yeah. So
I guess we'll just put that off for another time. I'm glad we didn't say what the topic was.
I know.
Geez, I guess I got to pull up.
Here we go.
I got to pull up all the information to do the read here. All right. So as Jen always says at the end of the shows, if you'd like to continue the conversation with us, you can visit our website at thecrazylifepodcast.weebly.com. You can email us at thecrazylifepodcast@outlook.com. You can find Jen on Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life. That's Jen with a G. Henno, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ida Henno. You can find me on Facebook, Henno Heiter. And if you have either read Henry Rollins' book or want to maybe talk about it,
Right?
I'd love to hear from you or any of the podcasts we've mentioned tonight. If you've read the Heroin Diaries, that was another great read. I love chatting about that stuff. So.
Yeah. Or 13 Reasons if you want to have a conversation.
13 Reasons too, yeah.
Yeah, go. You can post on there or post over in our Facebook group, which can be found at facebook.com/groups/Crazy Life Podcast. Or if you're on Facebook, just type in Crazy Life Podcast. Excuse me. You can find the show also on Twitter when I post when new episodes go up at the Crazy Life Pod. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like to at Stunami. The other podcast I'm on, Salty Language, can be found at salty_language or at saltylanguage.com. And that show is very not safe for work. So be warned. Let's see. We're part of the Wicked Radio Network and Tangent Bound Network, which can be found at tangentboundnetwork.com. And, what else am I forgetting here? Oh, if you'd like to help the show out, we'd greatly appreciate it if you're on iTunes, if you could, review us, and subscribe if you haven't already. Or I should say rate us, leave a review, and, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're using Stitcher or, other ways of listening to us, if they have a like or a share option, that would be awesome if you could use those. Or, even if it's just sharing our post on Facebook or on Twitter, that we greatly appreciate it. I think that's everything there. Excuse me. I, as always, want to remind everyone we're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals of any kind, just a couple of people sharing our experiences and opinions. If you think you need help, please seek out professional help. Please don't self-diagnose, and please don't use this show as a replacement for therapy. Please, like I said, as I've said various times before, go get the estimate. Even if you don't want to go through with something afterwards, but at least, go talk to a professional and kind of see what they say about a course of action. And, yeah. And then, of course, as we've already talked about in this episode, if you're feeling as though you may harm yourself or others, please go seek out help. Ask, talk to a friend or one of the hotlines that we have over on our Facebook group, or find the suicide prevention hotline number, those kind of things. Reach out to one of those, but please don't harm yourself or anyone else. And again, if you're even in the ideation stages of it, you're just having thoughts about it, again, the difference between, if you're actually having thoughts of harming yourself, make sure you talk to a therapist or talk to your doctor or whatever, don't wait to do that, because the earlier you catch it, the better, and the more likely you are to not do something. Whew. Yeah. And then lastly, reach out to somebody this week, or find some stuff online and, read up on, like we were talking during the show about, signs of depression or suicide or these kind of things, so that you can maybe be of service to somebody else, and reach out, if you have somebody in your life, if you haven't talked to them in a while or whatever, just tell them you appreciate them, you love them, or just see how they're doing. So, I think that's all of it. So,
pretty good.
Yep. All right. You want to take us out of here, sir?
Sure, I'd love to. If you have a chance, remember to turn down the volume this week a little bit. Maybe sit quietly. Take some of that noise that's going around in the world and shut it off for a little bit. And don't forget to keep breathing.